Welcome to part two of the English settlement of the New World. Now we're going to take a look at the first colonies. So with Queen Elizabeth and the firmly established Protestant faith in England, that took care of the religious turmoil sort of internally, but it caused a lot of problems outside, specifically with Spain. The King of Spain was not very thrilled with the fact that of what had happened in England, right? As a matter of fact, he wanted to do something about it. He saw Elizabeth I on the throne and said, she doesn't belong there. She has two attributes that automatically disqualify her for the crown. Number one, she's not Catholic, right? We need to return England back to the Catholic faith. And two, she's a woman, right? So he has these problems, so he goes to the Pope. He goes to Pope Sixtus V, and he asks for permission to invade England and return it to Catholicism. Of course, Pope Sixtus agrees, allows him to do it, allows him to embark on what will be called the enterprise of England, right? He starts to put together his Spanish Armada for the Great Attack. The Spanish Navy is the largest navy in the world, right? The English Navy is not the vaunted Royal Navy just yet, right? It's a lot smaller, okay? So, on July of 1588, the Spanish are going to gather together 130 ships with 8,000 sailors and 20,000 troops to sail into the Channel. Now, they're going to anchor the fleet off of Gravelines, which is near the modern port of Calais, right, and wait for additional troops coming from the Netherlands to embark even more troops for the invasion. And it's during that time that the British, with their smaller fleet, are going to make their move to try and do something about this, try and protect the British Islands, right? They are going to send 8 fire ships into that formation in the harbor. Fires for these ships are really bad. So here you got these boats loaded down with just everything combustible, burning away, heading towards their ships. So in a panic, these guys literally cut their anchors away to get away, right? And off they sailed. Okay. From there, the other aspect of the Royal Navy begins to kick in. Now, like I said, the Royal Navy is not as big, but their ships are smaller, faster, and guns can shoot further, right? And they're commanded by privateers that are very talented captains and favorites of Queen Elizabeth, like Sir Francis Drake, John Hawkins, right? And so they're going to harass the Armada. The Armada cannot cut through the English Channel. That's a bottleneck, and they can't use their force to bear, and the Royal Navy's got it bottled up. So they decide to go completely around the British Isle and then get to the southern coast of Britain that way. Now weather will kick in. Storms will batter the fleets. Ships that want to just find a harbor and anchor and wait storms out can't, because remember, they cut their anchors away. And by the end of it, of that 28,000 total men and sailors and soldiers, 20,000 of them will be dead, and over half of those 130 ships will be dashed, right? They'll be destroyed, and the Spanish Armada will never be the same. Now, while we were leading up to this, we are going to have Queen Elizabeth begin eyeing the New World, eyeing the Americas, right? Because things have started to get stable there in England. So, for example, she's going to give Humphrey Gilbert, another sailor and another favorite of her court, a charter to settle a permanent settlement in North America, right? She'll give it to him in 1578. He'll never exercise it because he'll actually drown in a shipwreck in 1583. That charter then will pass down to Sir Walter Raleigh, and Sir Walter Raleigh will begin coordinating the first English trip to the colonial trip to the Americas. Sir Walter Raleigh is going to fund an expedition to the Americas in 1584, right? And looking for a location to create a permanent settlement. He's going to arrive off the coast of modern North Carolina on the 13th of July of 1584, and he's going to attempt unsuccessfully to establish good relations with the Native Americans there. And so he will turn around and go home. They'll try again the next year. On April 9th, 1585, they'll land on Roanoke Island and attempt to create a permanent settlement. But again, they lack supplies, they don't have good relations with the Native Americans, everything's going to go pretty bad, and they're going to load up by that fall and turn around and go home again. So the first 2 attempts are going to be complete washes, right? The third attempt will take place in 1587, right, when John White on July 22nd, 1587, is going to land with a third group of colonists consisting of 90 men, 17 women, and 9 children on Roanoke. Now, included amongst them was a couple named Ananias and Eleanor Dare, and Eleanor was pregnant. She is going to have a daughter on August 18th, 1857, that they're going to name Virginia Dare. First English child born in the Americas. Why Virginia? Because the entire land was called Virginia. Sir Walter Raleigh dubbed the land when they landed the first time, this is Virginia, naming it after Elizabeth I, the Virgin Queen, hence Virginia, right? Like I said, you'll see a lot of this. Okay, in November of 1587, John White sailed back to England and promised to be back the next year with more supplies. He doesn't show up. Why does he not show up in 1588? Well, remember the Enterprise of England? That's when the Spanish Armada attempted their invasion of England. He was caught up in that defense of England. He doesn't make it back. As a matter of fact, he doesn't make it back for 2 years. When he finally gets back there in 1590, right, they're gone. Now we have the lost colony, right? The only evidence they find is that on a post somebody has carved the word Croatoan. They think maybe that's this nearby island that has that name. They check there. There's no evidence of them being there. And the current archaeology suggests that probably what happened is that most of them probably died off and the remainder probably integrated themselves into the Native American populations there, and that's where they ultimately all ended up going. So Roanoke is going to be the last attempt by Elizabeth I to establish a permanent English colony in the Americas, right? In 1603, she'll die. And then you'll have a succession crisis because remember, she's the Virgin Queen. She has no children. And so Parliament is going to begin looking through bloodlines, trying to decide who is the rightful claimant to the throne. And they decided the rightful claimant is James of Scotland. James of Scotland is the King of Scotland. He's James VI of Scotland. And he'll be asked to come down and become James I of England, right? So James VI of Scotland, James I of England, same guy, okay? Now, James I is going to begin granting charters for English colonies in the New World, but he does it based on business ventures, right? You're going to have wealthy Englishmen. They're going to try and see if they can make their fortune in the New World and ask the king for these charters. In 1606, King James I is going to give a charter to the Virginia Company of London, right? And that same year, he's going to give a rival company, the Virginia Company of Plymouth, a charter as well. Now, the Virginia Company of Plymouth will get a colony established first in early 1607 called Popham. And the place that they're going to pick is just horrible. It's a terrible mistake they're going to make here. They literally take a map and say, we'll just go straight west. And then that'll be perfect because the climate should be the same as England. Well, that puts you on the coast of Maine. And the climate is not the same as England, right? And so Popham lasts about a year and then it's abandoned. The Virginia Company of London has a little bit more success, right? Led by Christopher Newport in May of 1607, Jamestown is established with 105 colonists, right? Jamestown is in modern-day Virginia, right? And Jamestown is named after King James I. It's on the James River, again, named after King James I. Told you we're going to see a lot of this, okay? And it's a horrible place to put up a colony. It's in a swamp on a stagnant bend of the James River. And those 105 men, they're not really suitable for establishing a colony either. They're all either wannabe gentlemen or vagabonds, right? None of these guys know how to farm. None of these guys know how to iron work or anything. It's the one thing they do manage to successfully do is put up a wooden palisade, right? And their neighbors, they're not too impressed with them either. Jamestown's nearest neighbors were the Powhatan Indians. They were led by a chief named Wassenacow, but he often went by Chief Powhatan, and a lot of times that's how you see it in the textbooks as well, chief and then the name of the nation, right? The Powhatans were not very impressed with the settlers at Jamestown. They were a series of villages numbering somewhere between 12 and 20,000, and they're not really a threat when you think about it. You got 105 guys that are just scraping around trying to farm and stuff like that. When you've got a nation of 12 to 20,000 people, even using the low numbers there, That means they probably outnumber the Jamestown settlers in numbers of warriors, at least 10 to 1, if not more. Okay, and they almost found them comical because they're watching them try and farm, and in Powhatan society, women did the farming, not the men, right? Now, to be fair, also in Powhatan society, it's a matrilineal society. When, for example, when marriages took place, the man would move in with the wife's family, not the other way around. It was pretty typical of Algonquin societies at this time. So Jamestown now is being established, but it's got a long way to go before we can really say, is it going to stick?